Welcome to the late show. Welcome, welcome. Rest in peace, Pele. It's very sad news for a sporting icon like this to pass away, to die um, so early. It's always too early, of course, but when it comes to legendary players, iconic athletes like Pele, um, their presence in some shape or form um, is always somehow needed. Um, and I came across this beautiful picture of him lifting the World Cup trophy in its more recent incarnation, of course. He won it three times when it was still the Jules Rimet trophy, when it was still the original design. I, of course, having grown up in another age, to me, this is the more recognizable version. It is the solid gold version with those malachite rings at its base, um, and everything flows so beautifully. Uh, Maybe some of Pele's athletic achievements may be superseded at a certain point in time, and some of them already have been. But this sort of cohesion, this sense of style, this level of coordination, I don't think will ever be transcended. Imagine matching that solid World Cup trophy with an 18 karat yellow gold Rolex Day Date President um, and the gilt buttons of your navy blazer. It's really a beautiful image. It's how we would like to remember the original goat and honorary sovereign of the beautiful game, the striker who dazzled the football fields with his unbridled athleticism, footballing IQ, and creative imagination, which was truly unique in the era of his ascendancy in his singular combination at the very least. Three-time winner of the World Cup, the first black athlete to emerge as a global superstar, the wearer of a Rolex day date on a president bracelet in its original proportions, and clearly a man of style. Again, some of his sporting achievements will surely be superseded in time, but name another World Cup winner who had the good sense of coordinating with the iconic solid gold trophy, both their wristwatch and blazer buttons. Thank you for everything that you have given to world football and to the world of sport. God bless you and your loved ones. Rest in peace, Pele. What an amazing athlete, and what an important man. I wonder what was going on in his mind when he was watching the last World Cup final, if he actually got the chance to watch it um, with a clarity of mind. I hope that was one of his last experiences. I hope that was one of his lasting experiences. All right. There was a little bit of watch talk there, but mostly a tribute to the man and to a player that I did not grow up watching, of course, in real time, but I do remember I had not even a VHS, but a Betamax tape two tapes, in fact, named the best goals scored in World Cups. And the first tape, especially, was from beginning to end, sprinkled with all these beautiful goals that Pele had scored. Um, of course, he wasn't really an integral part of the team in '58, but he was part of that back-to-back World Cup winning squads of Brazil, 58, 62. And he also won the World Cup in 1970. So the game owes him so much. He opened not only people's minds, but really brought a kind of um, athleticism into the game that was decades and decades before his time. I want to start also with a question that I received from the audience last time around, and that I forgot to respond to directly because I was interviewing my friend Racing R. Let me bring that back up because one of my viewers, JMB, August 12th specifically, was asking me whether he should buy this particular chronograph. And as you can see, this is a split second chronograph by Breitling. It is in their current lineup. This particular model is in pink gold with a black dial, which provides a very beautiful contrast. It's a striking watch. Pardon me. And it's a rattrapante, so to speak, right? You know, it's a split second chronograph, and that's somehow made clear and dramatized by the way these two centrally deployed chronograph seconds splay out from the center. Now, I don't have a particular objection to this watch, but I'm not sure if I would countenance spending so much money on it. I think the stainless steel version of it is a little more attractive to me, but in either case, um, to me, this is simply too big, right? For me, again. So I will just put it out there. If proportions are important to you, if you suffer from chicken wrists like I do, if you have a wrist size, I don't even know how to express these things. I mean, I've never measured these things. I really don't care, but I know to most average sized people, to most normal sized people, to most of us who have not been so thoroughly affected by the hormones in the chicken and in processed foods of our time, a 42 millimeter case usually looks a little oversized. Now, that may well be what you want from this watch, because at the end of the day, even though this particular line, the Premier, so to speak, has a lot of classic and traditional design elements, um, they're also pretty sporty looking watches, especially in the stainless steel blue dial combination. The pink and gold is pink, gold, and black is also great. Um, but they are sporty watches. They are Breitlings, so perhaps you are looking for something oversized. The alternative that I will recommend, uh, perhaps in a view with a view to saving you a little bit of money, Again, this is not a model, or this is not a kind of watch that is available in precious metal, Jay. So it might not scratch the itch for you. But Habring 2, which is one of my favorites among emergent brands, has a beautiful series of uh, what they call Doppel, right? Doppelchronograph in German is the name for rattrapante, which is French, which we in English call a split second chronograph. They used to have this line as Doppel Felix, which was a 42 and change millimeter case. Again, maybe exactly 42 millimeter, as it says here. As you see in a variety of different dials, though for the most part in stainless steel. And this year, earlier this year, and not too long ago, really, they came out with Doppel 38, which basically reduces this watch into much more classical proportions. And the few models that they present here, I really like the slight contrasts that they have deployed by distinguishing the chronograph hands from everything else. I like two things about this particular watch. I like two things about getting a split second chronograph from Habring 2. One, it connects us back to the heritage of a certain moment in IWC in the late 80s, early 90s, where in fact their technical department, their um, movement workshop was at the forefront of creating modules on what are otherwise industrially produced, mass produced, run of the mill workhorse movements, converting them into perpetual calendar chronographs, split second chronographs, and finally also perpetual calendar split second chronographs. And if Kurt Klaus was really the brains behind that conversion of Valjoux 7750 to perpetual calendar chronograph in IWC's Da Vinci, Richard Habring was the person who came up with the module to convert the same Valjoux base into a split second chronograph. So that's his invention, really, and for him to carry it out these days as part of an independent venture is something that I would personally like to support. So that's why I'm going to, in a way, co-sign getting a Habring 2 chronograph, Habring 2 split second chronograph, especially. The other thing that I really like is the kind of bull's head design of these chronographs. I really love the fact that you have the two pushers separated out, one at 2 o'clock and the other at 10. And the 2 o'clock is basically a mono pusher for all intents and purposes, right? It start, stop, reset. And the 10 o'clock allows you to split the second chronograph seconds hand if you wish to do so while the first one is running. So you have essentially continuous seconds at 9 o'clock, 30-minute totalizer at 3, and you have two, in this example, two heat blued, centrally deployed chronograph seconds hands. Side note about Habring 2 is, of course, since they produce in such small numbers, you will be getting what is essentially a very rare watch, if not necessarily a one of a kind piece. Though, if that is somehow your aspiration, they're also incredibly helpful in basically virtually sitting down with you, hashing out details, and you can do that, to my knowledge, either directly but also through their authorized retailers, and they have a couple on each coast, basically, if you happen to be in the US. Now, I don't know that, but if you are, certainly that could be an option. You can either go through the retailer and see what they have in stock, or you can try to contact them directly. And I know Maria Habring, who is, of course, the partner of Richard Habring in more than one way, handles, I think, still most of the communications and the business side of things. So I'm sure they would be more than ready to help you. As you can see up here on the menu is retailers section. I'm going to drop the link to Doppel 38. And then I'm also going to drop the link to the retailer page, so you can see if there are any near you and if you would like to order through a retailer or contact Hublink 2 directly. All right, let me welcome people who have by now trickled in. Orange Hand. The Breitling triple date and split seconds chronos look great in photographs, but are very thick. Dressy looks, but won't slip under a cuff. I have found that to be the case with a lot of the Premier series. They are, like you said, all around quite thick, and that's especially noticeable when it comes to smaller case sizes. I will show a few wrist rolls that I did in the Breitling boutique here in Los Angeles, or rather Beverly Hills, which is where they have the closest one to me. And you can make up your mind on that basis, because the B09 they have is a 40 millimeter watch, but it sits so high on the wrist, like Orange Hand is saying. It just looks like very big. I have for once done very close-up shots here because I wanted people to see the dials, which are interesting and unique, if not necessarily desirable from my personal perspective. And then the Datora, which is the triple date with the moon phase, and the Salmon dial is right here. This is the 42 millimeter. So the proportions of the case would be very similar to this particular watch, if and when you are considering the Duograph 42, which again is quite a thick watch and also 42 millimeters in diameter. I also tried on a later occasion these two reissues or reeditions, the AV765, which is, of course, their iteration of the Pilot's chronograph. And I love, by the way, the original references for those, the 765, which was a watch that Jean-Claude Killy actually wore. And this is also for you to get an idea of the case material as well. This is the Navitimer 1959 edition, um, which is a reissue of the reference 806. And in this case, of course, it has that AOPA logo and the beaded bezel, which is a strong throwback to the 1950s when the Navitimer was basically sold through um, IOPA, which of course stands for Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. In fact, of course, this one is branded Breitling above that open book logo, but in fact, that was a lot of times even that was absent. It was just the open book logo for the American. Sorry, I keep saying American Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. Entire runs were simply retailed by them and delivered directly to them to be sold. So again, just to put it out there, I don't have anything against Breitling, especially when it comes to the 60s pieces, the vintage pieces, vintage chronographs especially. It's one of the brands that have contributed immensely to the modern chronograph to be worn on the wrist. So there's no there's no doubt to their importance for a collector who takes chronographs seriously. I'm not as big of a fan of Breitling in the contemporary period, although again, from a personal standpoint, uh, they have quite ingratiated themselves to me, especially under Georges Kahn's leadership and his collaborations with Fred Mandelbaum, who is, of course, one of the biggest collectors of vintage chronographs and one of the most knowledgeable people himself when it comes to vintage Breitlings, especially. Um, and he's kind of the brains behind a lot of these reissues and reeditions they have done more recently. Mr. Skydweller, it's nice to see you in the chat. Sometimes I miss you. You know, one thing that I will tell you, just so you know, I'm not ignoring you. Uh, you put your chair down, right? That's kind of your signature. When you only write in emojis, sometimes YouTube automatically blocks. So unless I have someone moderating the chat, or I happen to look at the chat from the other screen, from a YouTube screen, I don't actually see your message because YouTube automatically moderates it and hides it from me. So just so I'm more alert to your presence, maybe write your first message without the emojis, or at least with some words and emojis, so I know that you're there and I'm more attentive to the chat if you would like to connect with emojis. I know this is like an interesting conversation and a little silly, but I actually like this guy, so I don't want to I don't want to miss him when he is in the audience. Mookie says, I have been reliably informed by Tim Masso that all watches slip under a cuff, some better than others. Tim Masso does this trick every time. When you're seeing a wrist shot like this or a video like this from Tim Masso, the watches are always pulled all the way down. So it sits as flat on the wrist as possible and in an unhealthy way, in a way that you can't actually wear through the day. Um, so it is what it is. Don't trust everything you see on YouTube. Again, no particular shade thrown to Mosso, but that's kind of a meme by now, right? That's always what he says. And you can't blame him, right? Tim Mosso is not actually a walking encyclopedia. If you can believe it, the guy is actually a salesman. So every watch that he shows in those videos, he's trying to sell you that watch. I know sometimes all of this gets lost in the noise, but that's exactly what he's trying to do. So he's not going to say, hey, this is actually a pretty chunky watch, so you better stay away, because it won't really, if you are a business guy, it won't fit with 90% of your wardrobe, and there's no chance that you can wear this watch except for casual Friday. No salesman ever said something like that. So again, that's why I stay away from any sponsorships, any brand proposals, any advertisement by gray market dealers or uh, luxury conglomerates from the Swiss horological industry. You have to be you have to stay objective, right? If your primary purpose of being on YouTube and being on a live stream is to sell something, that changes the nature of the entire communication. So I'm very happy with what we have going on here, which is me just serving my audience, me being completely at the behest of my audience. Aiden Valento, nice to see you, man. What's up? What's up with you? And Mookie says, exactly, yes. I think this is the whole Tim Mosso conversation. I completely agree. Mookie, of course, you said in those two sentences everything that I've been talking about in 2 minutes. So I appreciate that. That's the gift of gab, so to speak. That's the gift of wit, which I don't really have um, as much as Muki does. So, Bruce G, hey, Happy New Year's. Happy New Year's. I wanted to just look ahead a little bit. Um, One of the interesting auctions that are coming up and that they have been advertising through social media is the Monaco Legends. Monaco Legend Group and Monaco Legend Auctions are holding another auction in late April in Monaco. They have not really served up the pieces yet. They have not really presented them yet. It's been, it's a few months ahead, so I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But I'm sure they'll come up with a very interesting selection again. And I guess they just did this spread for everyone to know that it's not going to be really one brand or another, but a very wide variety of pieces. I know that there is already a couple of things going on in Philips, which I want to highlight. In There's a single owner auction coming up at Philips in mid-January, basically between 13th to 20th. It's going to be online, very similar to the Beauty and Everything auction, through which Mark Cho sold off the majority of his collection. This is something they called le concours de complexité. A lot of complicated FP Jaune pieces, of which you can see just a handful here. Oh, wow. All right. Voulez-vous? Thank you so much. And thank you for the upvote. 1999. Wow. I'm so grateful. Thank you for streaming tonight. Can you explain how someone can obtain a Lange piece at retail? Asking for a friend. Hey, it's actually quite easy. It just depends on the piece you are looking for. Voulez-vous? I will. I'll put it like this: there are a few things that they just won't sell to a first-time customer, and some of them are the kind of application pieces, like the ultra complicated stuff, um, like minute repeaters, and perhaps some of the limited edition pieces. But when it comes to the regular production line, they pretty much only exclude the uh, the sport watches. So only the Odysseus, or Odysseus as the Germans say, only that is excluded in stainless steel, which is preserved to their um, most select customers. The precious metal versions of that, the white gold, you can actually request after buying a piece from them. And if you mean the Lange one with the double window date watch, that's actually quite easy. Um, the worst thing that would happen is if you go into one of their boutiques, say the one in New York or the one in Boston, there's a good chance that they would already have, especially in the little Lange, which is around 36 millimeters, and the regular size Lange 1, which is 38 and a half, they usually have a pretty reliable stock, right? So let me show you what I'm talking about so that we are not um, getting confused. But yes, so if we're talking about Lange 1, which you see in your screen now, um, you'll walk into the boutique more or less, and there's a great chance that they would already have in stock um, the regular version, which is the 38 and a half. They would have a couple of pieces in the little Lange, which incidentally is actually a model they introduced for the Asian market, even though it is predictably also preferred by a lot of women who like Lange watches. And the thing that I really like about these particular pieces is the guilloche on the dials, right? This pink gold one has a beautiful chocolate brown dial, and the white gold has kind of an anthracite type gray dial, and these are both quite gorgeous. The strap matching is a little more feminine than the regular size, but you can request anything that you would like. A lot of times they would have one or the other in stock, and the other one they can probably get you either from another boutique or in in a month or two, basically, probably faster, but I'm not their representative and I can't speak on their behalf. But there's a chance that if you choose any one of these, um, you might just walk out with one of them. Um, the pink gold one and the white gold one is relatively uh, more available than the yellow gold one, which incidentally is more rare. They usually have the silver dial for the pink and the white gold. And for the yellow gold, it's like a champagne tint on the dial. And this particular piece would be probably a special request and perhaps something they would not sell to a first time customer. But yeah, I would say go to the New York boutique, go to the Boston boutique, go to the boutique in Costa Mesa, South Coast Plaza. If you end up going to, again, you don't have to give my name, but if you end up going to either the South Coast Plaza or New York, I would be happy to give you the name of the person you should talk to. Um, there's a good chance that they might have it in stock. There's a good chance that they can get it to you in a couple of months. And a lot of other pieces, which take a little more time, um, they take a deposit. I think a third of the full uh, price, and you pay the balance when your piece arrives in the boutique. So they are quite reasonable, except when it comes to the Odysseus, right? Except when it comes to their so-called sports watch. Let me just click here. Oops. Yeah, I'm talking about this. Of course, again, the Zeitwerk is quite rare. That's the one with the double, kind of the steampunk fully digital display. That's probably a lot more rare. And yeah, anytime, anytime. Just write me an email, voulez-vous? And I would, again, you don't have to necessarily use me as a contact, but I will just write to you the email address and the name of the person that you should contact. And yeah, if you want to drop my name, that's fine. If not, in either case, I would be more than happy to help. Yeah, the Zeitwerk just got a movement update, basically, just got refreshed and has a longer power reserve now, a 72-hour power reserve, which is quite respectable for this kind of watch because, as you guys know, as you all know, the jumping hour complication is very power hungry, right? It's quite spectacular and really kind of a little marvel to see that hour click at the end of at the top of the hour and change into the next one, but it drains the caliber of a lot of energy actually. And this is fully digital, so in fact you have the running seconds and the minutes snap at the turn of every minute. So it's quite respectable to have a 72-hour power reserve for a full digital display watch like this. Yeah. So the more desirable models like the Zeitwerk, like the chronographs, either the 1815 or oops, the 1815 or the Datograph, both of these would probably require you to wait close to a year, um, and they cost a pretty penny as well. So the more complicated the watch, the more complicated it is to get it. Um, but honestly, they don't usually have wait lists. They don't have a lot of um, dishonest games or anything. Um, they do have a pretty clear pathway. Most watches, you just have to wait and put down part of it as a deposit. Um, and others, unfortunately, since they produce everything in such limited number, they reserve for people who have already purchased with them. And I understand that can be really frustrating. Um, but I don't think it's so unreasonable. And again, there are pieces that I would rather immediately get, uh, and it might actually change my mind and twist my arm, part of me, into um, thinking more seriously about some other pieces. But I feel like I'm the kind of person who will end up getting Lange one on the secondary market eventually. But hey, that's just the way I am. I like a deal. I hunt for a bargain. I haggle. I'm insufferable. So the boutique experience is really not for me. I am the kind of faceless, shameless person who would ask for a discount in the boutique, only to be chased away and laughed off, of course. But it's quite all right. Um, we don't need these things. Once again, we want them, we like them, we even love them and adore them. But you don't even need a single mechanical watch in your life. So it's all a luxury. And if they're not gonna treat you the way you want, if they are not gonna give you the deal that you feel comfortable with, you just move on. And I have no problem with that myself. Aussie expat. I'm friendly with a multi-brand that owns the Lange out here in Las Vegas, I think. Buy some uh, Van Cleef Arpels and get a Lange. Well, I know. Voulez-vous likes the Van Cleef Arpels watches, so that could be a good deal for her. But yeah, the Lange boutiques don't require you to buy any other watch to get a Lange one. Again, in like let me put it this way: when I was in the New York boutique, I could have gotten um, I could have walked out with either the pink gold little Lange one, or or the white gold Lange one. So either with this or with this. Sorry, with this. And when I was for the very first time, when I was in the boutique in South Coast Plaza, I could have walked out with this, which is the pink gold Lange one, because they had it in stock. This wasn't a display only or exhibition only piece. It was there. It was available. Um, it was for anyone to purchase. And when it comes to these kinds of models, especially at this time, um, and I'm not just talking about the end of the year kind of craze of trying to offload pieces. I'm also talking about the global condition of the watch market. They would happily give you a Lange one. Anything else might be a little bit more of a challenge, but their entry level models in the Lange one series, in the Saxonia series, they should all be available, or available for you to get in a month or two. Voulez-vous says it's watch specific. I get it. They reserve the rarest stuff for the top clients. This watch is just perfect. Yeah, I mean this is amazing. I also love the way they do the moon phase with that. See, that's the kind of watch you might have to wait a little longer. Um, but yeah, that's a watch they would also probably get for you, as long as you place an order and put down a deposit. They put the moon phase right in that um, running seconds sub dial right there. Good night. Get healthy. Voulez-vous? Thank you again so much for your super chat. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your question. Stay healthy. Drink some tea. Have a warm beverage and be safe. Ozzy, feel free to jump on, man. Nice. Yeah, it's good to discover these connections, because sometimes you don't know who runs what boutique. But yes, I mean, you don't have to buy any other jewelry or any other watches unless you want the Odysseus. You can just walk into the I know, people have gotten so used to buying from the gray market that they have forgotten that some of these brands, except for the last 2 years, were so easily available from the boutique. You just walk in and they have a lot of watches to offer you. It's been like that 3 years ago, and it will be like that again by the end of this year. This is what we have been saying all the way back in March, and it will most certainly be like that in 2023. So, um, for any one of you who is in the market for a brand like Vacheron Constantin, for Alain Gonzone, don't despair, and don't just habitually go into the secondary market just because the prices are dropping and getting closer on to the retail, to the MSRPs. Chances are you can actually go to a boutique and they either have a watch for you or something is coming in quite soon, or worst case scenario, again, they can get it for you in a couple of months. Okay. Sorry, Ozzy. I'm sorry that you're busy. And Justin is here. Justin, you can jump on. It's been a while since I talked to you. That would be that would be really nice. Aussie Expat says I did meet the owner, and this is the uh, Van Cleef Arpels and the Lange boutique at the Venetian. He was really nice to my wife and me. Vacheron Constantin is easy right now. I was pushed, pardon me, for an overseas, not for me. Yeah, I'm not again, people get really surprised of this, but I'm not a fan of the overseas. Maybe of the earlier generation of the chronograph, which is something that I actually recommended to my supporters on Patreon, sending a few links, and I will show you a few examples of that right now. But wow, thank you, Justin. Happy New Year to you too. 13.99 Canadian from our resident author, Justin Forge. Check out his books. I think they are available on Amazon. So as you write Justin Forge, I will actually send you a link to his author page on Amazon, where you can, I think, order his novel At the Gates of Valhalla. Says, always appreciated your insight and knowledge. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you and yours, Justin. It's always lovely to see you. And again, please be my guest if you have the time, if you have the energy. I would love to have you on the panel. Yes, I was just saying I'm not really a huge fan of the overseas, um, but I kind of like the previous generation uh, of the chronograph, which incidentally, and this would be a nice transition from the conversation we were just having on Langa One and Alan Gonzone in more generally. I love this piece because perhaps of the big date display. So this is the chronograph, the earlier version of the chronograph um, from the second generation of Vacheron Constantin overseas. It is based on a Frederic Piguet chronograph movement. This particular version has a titanium bezel and a beautiful gray anthracite dial. Um, I love the big date display at 12 o'clock. I also like the fact that all these three chronograph registers are of different sizes, but sizes that grow proportionally. Um, I like the fact that the 30-minute totalizer is a big eye, right? You know, it's oversized compared to the rest. Uh, I just think this is a beautifully designed watch. This particular example again is the titanium bezel version. They have settled around $20,000, but the trend has been downwards for a long time now. So I would be very patient. As you can see, this is a pretty pristine version as a full set. So a decent deal. There will be more deals to come. There will be more watches simply. This is the black dial version that comes on the full bracelet. And it's a black guilloche dial. As you see, there's some texture to it. That's right around 20,000 as well. They have a blue dial version, of course, which uh, for inexplicable reasons to me always commands a premium. But there you go. They had it in the previous generation too, even though it's not the same blue dial as the one that people go head over heels for in this particular generation. And then they also have um, a few different editions, but this is my absolute favorite, actually, the one with the white guilloche dial. It's a beautiful pattern. I think in this white silvered version, uh, it's that texture of the guilloche is even more striking. even more lively, even more dynamic. And this would be my favorite. And again, uh, they represent a value proposition compared to the current generation of Vacheron Constantin overseas. Um, but if you want that watch and if you want that blue dial, the best in the industry, as all the gray market dealers tell you, you will have to get that, I suppose, and pay a premium. But if you have a little bit more sense about you, these are the ones to run after. The big dates or the sports chronograph by Vacheron Constantin with the big date display at 12 o'clock. The reference number is 49150. Justin says low energy and headed to bed. Please feel free to join us at Live with Luke and Justin soon. Thank you for the shout out. I don't know what Live with Luke and Justin is, but please don't take it personally. Justin, I just don't watch any of the other shows except for Watch Nicholas uh, and and Bill Sanders, all of which are part of my featured channels, as well as, of course, my friend and collaborator Aussie Expat. Um, but yeah, again, no particular agenda or thought behind it. I just try to stay away from anything that even is loosely connected to Archieverse, Dungeon, um, Rabbit Ears, you know, uh, Marcelo Time, whatever else. I just don't do that stuff anymore. And I don't even know who Luke is, by the way. Much love to him. If he's your collaborator, I'm sure he's a fine guy, but I don't even know who that is. So I don't know. All right. Thank you, Justin. And hey, please click that link to his author page. I think the Kindle version of the book is available right away and at a very reasonable price. I think it's like 4.99. Yes, right there. And look at that. I mean, it's pretty well reviewed. 4 stars out of 35 reviews. The internet is a vicious place. If my channel was reviewed 35 times, I'm sure I wouldn't get anywhere close to 4 stars. So that speaks volumes. Justin, thank you again for your generous super chat and for your help as always and for your support. Bruce G says best hardcore watch talk in 2022 right here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I try my best. Um, as on that note, I will kindly ask you to hit the like button, upvote the stream. It really helps to gain just a little bit more exposure. It's something that you can do easily. So if you haven't, please hit that like button. It helps. Um, I will take a short break to get some water and maybe some tea as well. And I'll be right back in 5 minutes. I will just show you that this is, I think, a limited edition that they did. Another reference 49150 from the previous generation of Vacheron Constantin overseas. All right. Cheers. Who has time for tea? I can't, guys. I can't. It's it will it will deprive me of sleep. Too much caffeine or caffeine at this time of the night. So I'll choose something healthier and go for the whiskey. All right. I didn't talk much about my favorite releases of of the year, and I do want to talk about it in some way, to some extent, over the next 2 days. But I want to ask you, actually, I want to learn from you, and I want to see what you liked in terms of what the big four released this year, what came out of the Watches and Wonders, um, the watches that Omega released to crash the party in advance of the Watches and Wonders, what Rolex has released, what Patek Philippe has released, what Vacheron Constantin has released. Have you been impressed by or interested in what Audemars Piguet did for the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Royal Oak? Um, are you interested at all in any of the new releases from the independents in the run up to the Grand Prix uh, in Geneva, in the run up to that gala? Have you been taken by any of the nominees? What do you think of the Lyrique Etude number one, which is of course something that was uh, generated within the community, really, under the leadership of people from the Pure Horology Group, spearheaded by Bill Sanders of the Watch Art Sci channel. Um, I just want to hear more from you. What did you really like of everything that was released this year? What did you not like? Uh, you might want to express it even more strongly. Were there any releases that you couldn't suffer, that you kind of hate? Um, was there something that you were expecting and didn't find this year in 2022 in terms of watches? Let's talk a little bit about that. There were a few things that I was expecting and not really um, found, so to speak, from watches this year. Um, I was really hoping that Rolex would do something more interesting than flipped over GMT Master. Um, I was expecting something a little more imaginative, something a little more creative from Patek Philippe. Although, uh, I was probably fooling myself. I was probably tricking myself, because their trend has been tending towards uh, laziness and a certain lack of imagination, which I called the Rolexification of Patek Philippe, because that's the kind of behavior that we are somehow used to uh, seeing from Rolex, uh, and we usually give Rolex a pass for that kind of laziness, which we perhaps shouldn't. But in either case, I was really disappointed by these two big brands. Um, I can pretty much say the same thing about Audemars Piguet, but I think for me, the year 2022 has been bittersweet when it comes to Audemars Piguet because inevitably I was, and I still am, so excited about the 50th anniversary of the Royal Oak, which I think overall, with and without Audemars Piguet's involvement, um, has been celebrated quite uh, extensively all over the place. With exhibitions and auctions of Gérard Janta's um, artwork, with uh, basically with of course with the releases of with the releases of uh, 50th anniversary models, which you might say on one level, what's so special about a lot of them, except for the 50th anniversary rotor. uh, I won't fight you over it, but of course, when it comes to 16202, which replaced the 15202, um, which itself had a decade-long existence, finally, pardon me, Audemars Piguet replaced the by now legendary caliber 2121, based on Jaeger-LeCoultre's 920, which is something that uh, Jaeger-LeCoultre designed in 1967, uh, and it remains the Jaeger-LeCoultre 920 to this day the thinnest self-winding movement with a full rotor, as opposed to, let's say, a micro rotor, which is usually sunk into the uh, bridge plates of the larger movements. So it does slim down the watch movement quite considerably. But JLC's caliber 920, which powered generations of sports watches by Audemars Piguet, by Patek Philippe, by Vacheron Constantin, among others, um, had been the beating heart of the Royal Oak for 49 years. And it was only this year, it was only in 2022 that Audemars Piguet moved to design and build a new movement for the Royal Oak, for the model that they now call Jumbo Extra Thin. And that caliber is actually marginally thicker. So JLC's caliber still remains the thinnest, but they have managed to, of course, um, architecturally and creatively fit it still within the same case, which is a feat they also have always achieved since 1984 in um, using that base, that particular canvas, for the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar as well. So that's that's the story of Audemars Piguet and the Royal Oak, obviously, for year 2022, which has been again somewhat bittersweet for me because on the one hand, I could not help but get excited um, about the 50th anniversary um, of the Royal Oak. On the other hand, I'm never really too enamored with the current directions that this particular brand, especially under the leadership of the current CEO, has taken. Hey Nick, how are you doing, man? Why don't you jump on? Talk to me. If I mean, if you have time, if you would be interested, why not? We can talk watches or anything else you would like. I think Justin may have gone to bed already, unfortunately, and so has Vivi earlier. But if you have some time, if you're in the mood, please jump on and we can talk about watches. I was mostly talking about um, my disappointments with the 2022 releases. I have spitballed about this and about Omega's releases, and specifically the Moonswatch in yesterday's broadcast. So today I was basically talking the ish about Rolex, Patek, and Audemars Piguet. Vacheron Constantin, honestly, I was actually quite happy with. Uh, I thought it was a stroke of genius the way they revived the 222. Of course, Vacheron Constantin is a brand that I think holds actually a very unique position among the so-called Holy Trinity of Swiss high horology. That's a very contested term, um, not least because of its theological resonances, I guess. But more importantly, a lot of people I know like to push aside Vacheron Constantin because they are owned by a luxury conglomerate rather than uh, being independently owned by a family, which is still the case with Patek and Audemars Piguet. Of course, that's one of the rote memorizations uh, that people indulge in when talking about watches and when talking about horology. It's easy for people to just repeat things they have heard without actually putting these ideas under the critical lens. Just because uh, a brand is led by a family, it does not mean it is therefore less corporate, that it is less greedy, and that it is somehow guided by loftier and more noble aspirations. Um, so I reject that sort of idea that Patek and Audemars Piguet are somehow more pure than Vacheron Constantin because Vacheron Constantin is owned by Richemont and Audemars Piguet is still um, majority stake of the family Audemars and the family Piguet and you know because Patek Philippe since 1930s has been owned by the Stern family, the famous um, dial makers extraordinaire of the Swiss industry, among many other things, of course. So when it comes to Vacheron Constantin, they actually distinguish themselves, I think, on an objective perspective from the other two, so to speak, of that equation, from Patek Philippe and from Audemars Piguet. I think they have a very diverse catalog, uh, a great archive of original designs. They love making uh, cases and shapes that are a little more adventurous, a little more dynamic, a little more artistic than Patek usually. That's not uh, that's not a rule, right? Patek Philippe has in their archive and even their in their current, pardon me, current catalog, certain original designs. And if you go past, of course, there's a lot designed by Gilbert Albert and, of course, Gérard Jantin as well for Patek Philippe. But when you look at the broad sweep uh, of designs, Vacheron Constantin takes a little more risk than Patek Philippe, uh, which is a brand that has traditionally erred on the side of conservatism and a kind of simplified, if not simplistic, distilled vision of aesthetic beauty. And Audemars Piguet, of course, in many ways, for better or worse, has turned into uh, a single watch, single model brand. Uh, that might be lamentable to some, uh, quite fascinating and intriguing for others. I'm a huge fan of the Royal Oak, so uh, I could care less. I think Audemars Piguet still has had at least very interesting designs and watches in their catalog, but by and large, both of these brands combined does not even get close to, I think, the originality and variety of Vacheron Constantin in terms of designs. You can especially look at the different things that Vacheron has been doing on their lugs, even to get some idea of this. Of course, the contemporary uh, Corne de Vache would be the most uh, immediately recognizable example, the 1955, the 1955 historique chronograph. But more broadly, this is a brand that has kind of an artistic edge, right? And you can see that also in um, in their métier d'art collection as well, right? Which really simplifies a lot of what is going on the dial to draw attention to the particular uh, designs that are executed in the manner of engraving, in the manner of grand feu enamel, cloisonné enamel, other forms of mosaic inlays or painting or any combination of the above. Um, and they have actually done this four-piece release, which they debuted in the Louvre Museum in Paris. Right, these four pieces. So they have that sort of tradition of doing something more artistic, and they of course have, and this is something that's more obvious and that most of you will already know. They have a series called the Historique, which leans heavily on this idea that Vacheron Constantin is the oldest continuously operating watchmaker in Switzerland. So they have this archive that goes all the way back uh, to 1755, and that they can avail themselves of in reimagining for the present into the future. And 222, I think, found the right moment to come back, because this was a model that was very much hiding under the shadows of its siblings, so to speak, that were properly designed by Gérard Jantin. I'm talking about the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak and the Patek Philippe Nautilus. Vacheron Constantin 222 was actually released to celebrate the 222nd anniversary of the manufacture. Um, so came out in 1977, and it was a piece designed by Jörg Haschek. Um, oh wow! Thank you so much. Let me uh, let me try to circle back to talking about the Vacheron Constantin 222. I will give priority to Basil's super chat. 9.99 US dollars. Thoughts on the Vacheron Constantin overseas 47040. Mm, yes. Do you have a particular preference for the dial color? So basically, this is the contemporary of the chronographs that we were looking at earlier, but it is the time and date version of uh, of them. So let me start with the white dial, perhaps. Oh, St. Peter, thank you so much. 9.99. Love is the way. Love is the way. So let's start with the white then. That's kind of the perhaps the neutral base. We were talking about the chronographs earlier, which have the reference number 49150, if I'm not mistaken. This is the time and date version. This is the second generation, right? The current overseas generation is the third. They introduced it in 2016, um, and it was kind of a slow burner. It took really a couple of years, if not a few years, for it to start to catch on, and really until the pandemic, uh, to for it to really start stepping out of the shadow of the Nautilus and the Royal Oak. Um, this is the We are talking about the third generation in this case. This reference number that we are looking at is the second generation 47040. Um, and it's kind of the transitional reference, because there were earlier examples of the second generation as well that had different dial layouts. Um, I don't know. I'm kind of partial to the chronographs again. Uh, I'm not personally. I'm not particularly fond of the big Arabic numerals on this watch. I like it. I like it. I want to say that I think it's maybe a little bigger than the current generation because um, the current one is 41 millimeters on paper, and it wears nicely. I mean, it doesn't wear too big, but let's see. I think I have a picture of it on my Instagram on my wrist, which you can use as a reference since I keep posting different kinds of watches and how they look on my wrist to judge for yourself. Um, but 41 on the integrated bracelet design is already quite big, right? Not monstrously big, but quite large, right? The reason that the current generation is so hot um, is really because of the way that people desire this particular blue dial, if you ask me. Um, Otherwise, you know, it's not a significantly different watch. Obviously, it has the new version has the uh, easy exchange kind of system uh, for its bracelets and bands, and they give you three types of bracelet and bands, which can easily be um, changed around. So you can wear it on the full stainless steel bracelet, on the rubber band, on the leather strap, and you can change from one to two without using any tools. I think that's really practical. I think that's something that they use to really entice a lot of people. Um, it's pragmatic. I understand. The thing I want to also highlight is that the 47040 is trying to make sure I'm trying to get this right because okay, it runs on the Vacheron Constantin caliber 1226, um, which is um, based on the Jaeger LeCoultre caliber, whereas the more recent version, the latest generation, has what they advertise as an in-house caliber, of course. Um, so let's see what that actually is. The thickness of the watch that we are looking at right now, the second generation, is 9.9, whereas the current generation, which is 40, I think the reference number for that is 4700. Um, that is 11 millimeters in thickness and has the caliber 5100, which has power reserve of 60 minutes, 60 hours, I'm so sorry. Whereas the older um, movements had a power reserve, I think, of, I'm trying to see, power reserve of 40 hours. So the new one has perhaps the more desirable dial. It has a more streamlined design. The watch is a little smaller, but a tiny bit thicker. It has a different bezel, um, maybe more, again, more balanced in that particular aspect. The new version, the new generation has the easily interchangeable bracelet, strap, band system, which the older generation lacks. Um, and of course, it has an exhibition case back, which the second generation overseas, the watch that we are looking at right now, does not have. It has a solid case back with this, pardon me, image of the ship, you know, overseas. Um, and quite honestly, by the way, Basil, these watches trade around, between $15,000 to $20,000, and while they might seem a relative bargain, and I'm not trying to push you away from them at all, considering that the Vacheron Overseas, the current version, lists for 22 and a half thousand, I think, $22,500. It's as it should be, really. This is how the secondary market should be priced at. Um, we just went through a very crazy period where things were uh, completely out of control. I think it's going to come back to these levels eventually, and I think these represent a reasonable deal. Um, I want to say again, I'm not particularly hot on the overseas period. So if I'm nitpicking with one element of design here, one element of design there, don't mind me. I do prefer the chronograph versions compared to this time and date. But if you actually like the design, um, if you can get a good deal on it, especially on a version on the bracelet, I think it's a great value proposition, as you mentioned. Compared to the Royal Oak, um, and the Nautilus, of a similar vintage, of a similar complication. Um, it's so much cheaper, so it can be a good option. But mind the things that I've mentioned, compared to the new version, which has the in-house caliber. It's a little shorter on the power reserve, around 40 hours compared to 60 hours on overseas, the third generation. Um, it doesn't have the easily exchangeable bracelet and strap system. Um, it has a slightly different and perhaps arguably bulkier design. But otherwise, I think it's a very interesting watch that I like a little more in its chronograph iteration. But the time and date offers an interesting value for sure. And again, they do have, don't take me wrong, as you can see here, they do have the leather strap and rubber band options. It just happens that they are not easily interchangeable, right? You actually need tools to change from one to the other. Um, so keep that in mind. Keep in mind the minute differences from one to the other. But if you actually like the aesthetics of the watch, this can be a good deal. Yeah, it is the second generation, and Happy New Year to you as well, Basil. Um, yeah, again, if you ask me a question, you can count on me dissecting it to its most minute points. I hope I didn't, um, go off on a tangent, but I think it's a good deal. I think it's an interesting value proposition compared to the Royal Oak and Nautilus of a similar um, configuration. Um, but I would wait a little longer to see how the prices trend, and they have been trending down. And if you really like the overseas, and if you're not particularly set on the blue dial, you might actually be able to get one through the quote unquote official channels. Whether it's an authorized dealer or a boutique. And I think in Vacheron Constantin's case, only the blue dial is boutique exclusive when it comes to the overseas. I think the others, I think, can be gotten uh, with the. Yeah, I think they can be gotten with the through the authorized dealers. I mean, if they still have them, but I think they do. It's not. Vacheron Constantin has not yet gone boutique exclusive. Um, although, again, they're very lovely in their boutique. Unlike so many other brands that I can name, I've never had an unpleasant experience in a Vacheron Constantin boutique, whether it was in Beverly Hills, in South Coast Plaza, in New York. Uh, they really treat you right as a customer. Um, they're completely at your behest. They show you everything, give you all sorts of convenience and information. Um, they're quite pliable and helpful. And you're on the East Coast, so I would actually go to the New York boutique, which is their flagship location. I think it is the biggest Vacheron Constantin boutique they have in the entire world. So I would certainly go there and talk to them. They have the most extensive stock that of Vacheron Constantin watches that you can find in North America for sure. Um, and they get what they want. So if you want something specific that they can actually deliver that is not so exclusive, it's not out of reach. It's not completely unreasonable. Yeah, yes. Patience is a virtue, but St. Peter, I love, yeah, I love all my people who came out today. I really appreciate you all. Voulez-vous earlier in the show, Justin Forge, again, both of them went to bed relatively early. One being sick, one being a little tired and low energy. So I hope they're feeling uh, better already. And Basil's and St. Peter, um, who are my friends from the East Coast. And um, cheers, guys. It's so lovely to see you both. Do you want to jump on St. Peter or Basil's? It would be lovely to have you. All right, so yeah, even if you are not gonna join St. Peter and Basil, this goes for you as well, since I know you guys are both there. Tell me, tell me what was your favorite release of 2022 in terms of watches. It can be a wild card. It can be something that I didn't even discuss today, that I didn't even hint at. It can be something predictable. Maybe you actually liked it. If you have any disappointments, feel free to voice them as well. Um, I actually have a pretty specific watch that I think for me is the best release of the year, but um, people already know my biases, so uh, you might actually even know what I'm talking about. No? Okay, maybe I lost you both suddenly. I don't know if um, I'll probably save my discussion of my favorite release from 2022 for the next live stream. But if Basil and St. Peter come through, we can. All right. No, man, I respect it. I respect it because I presented a negative opinion on it. It's good to have a counterpoint. It's good to have a balance. I hate to say it. You don't have to say it. But the Moon Swatch, the Swatch Moon Watch is my pick. It just created such a big buzz. Look, that's undeniable, right? I actually waited in one of those lines myself. So it's no secret to me that in the short term, right, if we home in to year 2022, and to be fair, this was my question too, it's undeniable that this particular release created such a buzz and has drawn so much attention to Swatch in particular that it would be dishonest to say it was not successful in the year 2022 in the short term. Hi, Mike David. Nice to see you. So I'm not gonna say that I've never said that, right? I said just from my perspective, I was disappointed by it. I think the product that they actually provided is pretty substandard um, and gimmicky, and I don't think it will actually benefit Omega and the Speedmaster brand in the long run, even though it can be a very successful publicity campaign in the short term. It has created a lot of foot traffic into Swatch boutiques. It has created a lot of new buyers for Swatch models that are not the Moon Swatch. And arguably, and this is what Bruce G says as well, um, it has attracted perhaps a new kind of customer into the hobby. Again, I hope that will be long lasting. I hope that is actually true. But anecdotally, I can tell you this. Again, when I actually waited in one of those lines in San Francisco, I talked to a lot of different people in the line. And I have to tell you, some of them were watch enthusiasts and collectors just like me who, collected at very different segments too. Very diverse group of collectors and enthusiasts. Pardon me, people who were buying, almost exclusively sub $500 watches. There was a guy who drew into the city and next to the Swatch boutique, uh, like around 7:30 in the morning, and set up an entire table and gave people free donuts and coffee. And he was a big time collector himself. Um, so there was a lot of people who loved watches to begin with, but there was a whole different crowd, and I think they were actually in the majority, who who were hype beasts in the simple uh, pedestrian meaning of the word, like in the sense that these were younger kids, uh, not even millennials, but Gen Z uh, generation, um, who were just looking for the next drop. Right? This was something interesting, something cool, something hip, that attracted their attention, and they just had to have it. So they lined up in the same way that everyone else lined up, because it was something hot that created a buzz. So um, I hope some of those people, and because there were a lot of disappointed people, including me on that day, because they made a huge mess, because they didn't deliver any of the promises, because they were playing a game. They had already allocated most, or if not all, of those watches before people even started lining up. But beyond that, I hope those people ended up getting those watches, and I hope they will stay in the hobby uh, for a long term. St. Peter, are you there? Hello? Can you hear me? Unmute if you can. Hello? All right. While St. Peter is working out the microphone issue, can you hear me? I can hear some
Yeah, I can
clicks.
hear you.
All right. Perfect. How are you doing?
How is the sound? Should I get my headphones or is this good?
No, this is pretty good. Welcome back to.
Okay, nice. Hey, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me back. Happy holidays, happy New Year.
Thank you, man. Happy holidays and happy New Year to you as well. How you been since I last saw you?
I've been good. Busy. It's been weird because the whole time since I've seen you, like I have been focused on work and everything. Oh, you gotta you got to be focused on work. You got to, you got to get the job done, the whole thing. But everyone else, everyone's on holiday. This is like everybody is like vacation time.
Right.
And then I realized, a lot of this stuff, it's kind of bullshit, like, everybody says like, oh, well, you gotta work hard, you gotta, it's like, come on, man, at the end of the
Holi-
year, this is all bullshit. It's all bullshit.
You know,
Today,
Germans have Germans have a very nice term for this particular season. They call it between the years in a way, right? Because you're you're in this limbo where uh, people around you might not work at all, might have taken the entire time off. You might have other responsibilities, or theoretically you are in holidays and on vacation, but you perhaps have to deal so much with family drama that you don't actually get any free time or 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 time to breathe, time to relax. So it's a very confusing time, and it kind of falls between the cracks and suddenly disappears, and before you know it, it's already back to work anyways. But I'm sorry you didn't really catch any break. You didn't really have a time to breathe.
no, I did. Sorry, I plugged in some headphones. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just checking. So, no, no, I had this great time. I got to see my family, I got to see my brother, I got to see my father. My mother was in town before the holiday, but for me, the real treat is like when I get to see my brother because, he is like, he is the father of my niece and my nephew. So this is the future generation, right? And I realize this. I was talking about this tonight. I saw this guy who I met. It was really randomly. I met this person in my neighborhood, and within the past year and a half or so, like I met this guy through another person, and it was totally random. But we have a very similar opinions, like ideologies, whatever it is, the things that make you smile, the things that make you say, hey, that's it. And I saw this guy tonight, and I have not gone out recently because I've been so riddled with work, and I've been so, oh, I got to work on myself, and I got to get all my bullshit in order, all these things about, oh, I must do this. And tonight I was like, fuck it, man, I'm going out, And the main reason why I did that is because everybody around me is like, yeah, well, we're not working today. I'm like, well,
Is,
why the fuck am I working? And I
by the way,
actually clocked it.
is this guy the watch guy that we were talking about, your new friend?
No, no. So this is actually an interesting character. I'll tell you about him. Like I don't want to reveal too much about this character because I don't believe I've ever previously told you about him. However, the person who you were just asking me about, I did see him tonight as well. And that's another part of this complicated story, but I won't get into that. But the other guy, so I bumped into this guy, and
Yeah.
he like ran completely randomly. Like I met this person because I moved to this neighborhood and I know this guy, and like blah 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 blah. Like I'll tell you this story later, but I won't bear you with the details. But I met this person, and we immediately were like, "Hey, what's up? What's going on?" I saw him a couple times in the neighborhood. A year and a half goes by. I saw this person, and they told me, "Oh, I'm wearing this watch, right? Like I'm wearing a watch." And I'm like, "Oh, what's that watch you're wearing? Where'd you get it? Who made it?" And they're like, "I have no idea what you're talking about," because I immediately started geeking out on like, where's the watch from? What year is it from? Who made it? They're like, "I have no idea. I just got it from my grandfather." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So like, what's the, I get all the technical shit. What's the strap? What's the clasp? Like all this stuff. They're like, I have no fucking idea. And I'm like, oh, well, somehow I end up telling them, well, there's this like, you could put this NATO strap on your watch. The whole thing with this NATO strap is it goes through the spring bars, and so if one spring bar fails, the whole watch doesn't fall off your wrist. And this is this whole thing. Like I told this guy, I was like, listen, like get a NATO strap. They're not the most glamorous, they're not the most attractive, whatever, but it's designed so that if a spring bar fails, one of the two spring bars that's on the case, you don't lose the watch. So I see this guy tonight and the sun is setting and I left my apartment and I'm on my whole like personal quest, whatever it is. And I'll send you this. I'm gonna send you this photograph because it was the most banal, like just bullshit ass sunset in my neighborhood that I've seen, but it was so beautiful because the sky was empty and there were no clouds and all this, it just the sun setting, it's in the winter, and I'm like running towards the water just to like, I gotta catch this because I thought like, oh no, the water, it's boring sunset, whatever. And I see this guy and I'm like, hey, what's up, man? And he was like, hey, you told me about that watch strap. And I'm like, I couldn't remember. And then he told me, he's like, no, you told me if I bought this strap and it broke, like I'm like, wait, I thought I told him about the cheapest. I'm like, wait, are you talking about that cheap watch strap? Like the one
Yeah.
that costs like $5? He's like, no, you told me and if it broke, I wouldn't lose my watch. And
Right.
I
So
couldn't even remember. Honestly, I can't even remember the story. But like this guy, because I told him the story about, oh yeah, you could buy a NATO strap, and it's ugly, but the whole design is that if you have one spring bar, and he was like, and I didn't lose my grandfather's watch because you told me that. And like I randomly bumped into this guy on the street. I gave him this huge hug, and I was like, hey, I want to have a beer with you, but like I'm running to photograph the sunset because it's so beautiful. And he's like, I know, I was just there. Like I just saw it. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna see you at the bar. And I went and I took the picture, and that was it. And then I had a whole like conversation with him, you know, and it didn't get that, like we couldn't really talk about specifically about watches and why it was that you know he bought this watch strap and it worked that way, but he was just so thankful because he had this experience where boom, like one of the spring bars failed,
yeah.
but he maintained his grandpa's watch.
Hey man,
And that to
that's amazing, right? Because the, that's basically that bonded you to that guy because you gave him what to you was kind of an offhand, random tip, and it actually proved useful to him, and it helped him keep his family heirloom. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's a such a lovely anecdote. Thanks for sharing that.
I mean, the most beautiful thing to me was I was like, oh, so tell me about your family, right? So he gets into telling me this whole story, which I won't belabor you with those details, but rest assured, and because of my various diatribes that I have a tendency to go on and on about, like I
Yeah.
can absolutely tell you about, and so I won't do that now, but that absolutely was part of this experience. And I haven't seen this person in a while. That they're very they're a very intellectual individual. Like like my experience with them tonight is we shared this like, oh, we come from this very really blue collar, like, oh, this is our American experience, but like he has attained this level of like he's got all these accolades and this privilege, and he works for one of the most coveted uh, you know uh, media entities. Let's put it that way. Like I'm trying to be as abstract as possible. Like he works for. It's just like, oh, you work for this company. Like that's amazing. And that was I when I first met him. I met him under those pretense because I met him through his coworker. And it's like, oh, you work for this company, and so I immediately come into this thinking, oh, I have all these preconceived notions, but none of my whole experience, like knowing this person, is just bumping into them on the street in the neighborhood, and and that to me has been like this very beautiful experience. Just slowly over time, like randomly bumping into this person, getting to know them, and it does. There is like an element of flattery, when you say, "Hey, I'll give you this advice." They take it, whatever. Um, I mean, I could say the same thing if I said, "Hey, buy a Nautilus," when the market's down, and then they make a bunch of money. But like, unfortunately, I wasn't in the position to do that.
Well, I mean, look, if you were financially quantifying it and putting into that sort of calculus, no doubt that would have been a better advice. But maybe I'm sentimental. I have been called a romantic as well. But I think your advice that helped him keep his grandfather's watch is, at least from my perspective, it's more important. You can make that kind of money in so many different ways. I mean, no one has really become rich from flipping a Nautilus. You can make considerable amounts of money if you really bought it at retail and sold it at the highest, you know. But it's not going to be life changing at any rate. So,
You know,
whereas losing a family heirloom would have bummed him out considerably, to say the least. If not much worse.
right. I totally acknowledge that, and there is this part of me that there's an aspect of jealousy when I hear that. Oh man, like you have that family heirloom, like you want to hold on to that. I had a very long conversation. Just because I don't even know why it happened, but somehow I ended up talking to my mother this evening about a cousin of mine and all this stuff. Like one of my friends moved upstate, and I just triggered this whole like, oh, I got to talk to my mom because I know her nephew lived in this town, and then she's like, oh, I haven't talked to him in a while. And like we had this whole conversation, and her brother has done a lot of research on my family tree. Like all this stuff,
Yeah.
and no one else in my family, only her brother. Like her brother has focused on this in a way that no one else in my family has focused on it, and he's done research all the way back to like the early American days, like deep, like, and to me it's astounding. And it's this thing that just people are like really not that interested in. Like they kind of don't really care, because if it's a couple generations removed from their lived experience, they don't really know. And what I've come to realize, especially with these objects, these things that we have in our lives, sentimental things, property, possessions, etc., that you can, especially in the case of heirlooms that have inherent value, you could pass down through the generations. There is a culture in that. Like there's something that says this is an object of value, and And so many times, as me being this person who's entering this watch collecting space and trying to get up to speed and, trying to catch up with all these people around me who it's just advanced. Like, I see them and they tell these stories. You see this on Hodinkee all the time. They interview people who are novice watch collectors, but oh, my dad was a watch collector, or like my mom was a watch collector, and like that's not my experience. Okay, like I'm coming into this, I'm trying to build this thing from the ground up. Like I'm literally trying to tell my family believe in this. Like I believe in this. I want you to believe in it too. And I have to sell that to them. I have to make it be this thing. And it's so important for me to do that so that when I pass on and I leave my Rolex, I leave my Cartier, I leave my a 500 piece Corona Tokyo that no one cares about right now, but maybe in 50 years as a cool collector's piece,
Hmm.
that they don't just sell it off. Like they actually care about it, that this is a family heirloom. Like for me,
Why
that's
not?
the question. How do I make that happen? How do I make them think I must not just sell this piece off? Like this
In a way,
matters.
if I remember correctly, you're a first generation college student as well, right? Or
Right.
at least
That's
first one to graduate from college in your immediate family,
yes, that's correct.
right? So, I mean, in a way, you have rehearsed this experience, perhaps even in a more vital manner, right? Because at the end of the day, again, for me, collecting watches at discrete moments can be everything, but in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. It's not that important, right? It's rather insignificant. But when it comes to something like, higher education, which, between the two of us, we value quite a bit, um, you have already gone through that experience where people can bank on this sort of lived experience of their family, of having been there, done that, having attended these sorts of very selective and at times quite elite institutions of privilege. Um, you know, they may have had academic libraries in their house when they were growing up, or their mother may have had a studio in their house, when she was painting, like, at least a few hours every day or something like that, right? um, and you didn't have that experience. Neither did I, by the way. I'm also a first generation college student in my family, and I couldn't bank on all these things that people around me could. I couldn't bank on that sort of um, social capital, so to speak. I had to earn it myself. I had to start from scratch. So when it comes to the collecting watches, I think that's child's play for you. You can just enjoy it because you have already lived this experience and owned it and won over it, transcended it in such a grander scale. Bruce
No,
G says, "Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
legend," and Full On John says, "Words of a wise man," for what you just said, SP.
thank you. Listen, guys. I really appreciate that. I mean, I'm in a rare state tonight. Which is oftentimes when I decide to hop on. I'm in a moment of I don't know what the correct terminology would be. It's uninhibited I think is probably the best way to describe it. But
Okay.
at the same time, like I generally feel like there's a moment when you just have to say like, well, this is it, and I want to say that, and I feel like especially around this time of year, the year's coming to an end. We're facing this unprecedented, whatever 2023 will be. And I realize and I understand it's going to be whatever it's going to be. But I can't help but at the same time acknowledge that there's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of people who are saying, oh, the recession, 2023, 2020, and to me, it's like, I go out there in the world and I talk about this kind of stuff with people, and they're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? You know? And I think that there's a certain, I think that there is a certain, uh, there's a certain class, there's a certain group of people who say, well, this is what the world is going to be, and that's that. And there's another group of people who say, well, what? Like, I don't get it, you know? And I think this whole like trickle down effect of, well, you better hold on to your cash. You better stay liquid, right? Because it's coming. Like, says who, right? And I'm not trying to say everybody just go out there, spend frivolously, ignore all these market trends, etc. Um, but at some point in time, it's one of these things where it's like, okay, well, if you believe that's the case, if you believe like everything's just going to keep collapsing, like why believe in anything? Okay, like why, like why believe in why believe that any of these things have inherent value? And for me, especially being a newbie to this scene, and just getting into it, and it especially weighing on my conscience, saying, why am I doing this right now when I could be doing things other than this, is because I know, either either the entire world is gonna collapse and fall apart, or my Rolex will still be cool, a year or two from now. And that's
Well,
it.
I will give two examples, or two analogies to what you're describing, and one a little bit, you know, in a joking, humorous spirit, and the other one more serious. There was an Onion article, the Onion article, a few years back, maybe already a decade ago now. Um, that was something like, okay, I found it actually, so let's pull it up. Bruce G.
Pull it up.
Every man, no gender bias intended, must decide what's important to him. Thanks for sharing, SP. Thank you, Bruce G, for your contribution for 99 US dollars. So this is what the Onion has alerted us in 2010. US economy grinds to halt as nation realizes money is just a symbolic, mutually shared illusion. It's just scraps of
No,
paper,
no,
baby.
money is real. It's all that matters. Like yeah.
Um, so at the end of the day, it's our entire system of value has this imaginary dimension that we invest in the only currency that really matters, and that's belief, right? So
Mhm.
that's the that's the more serious part. I think Claude Lefort had an essay on this. It must have been translated into English at some point. It's that like what we do when we believe. I think something, or what does it mean to believe? Um, Let me see if it exists somewhere.
But why,
Ah,
why
it's
be?
the idea.
I have to say, and I do want to hear the full quote, but I mean, you nailed it, right? The point is, for me, like I have this quintessential, like, or existential question to answer, which is, do I continue believing? Do I continue buying into this and believing it's worth it or not? And for me, and my experience, and all the people around me who are prepared, like, they're fucking, like, they're freaked out about this zombie apocalypse shit. Like, I know a lot of Americans who are generally like, that actually has affected their way of life. They're like, what does that matter? Like, I'm just trying to stack, like, food that has like a long shelf life and have all these weapons and like all this stuff. I'm like, what? Like, are you, like, really? Like, does that at that point in time? Like, if you're living in the zombie apocalypse, like, what about anything that you understand about your life that right now even matters? Like, does it even matter? Like, and I get it. Like, I get this whole essentialist, like, I must survive no matter what. But that's the life. Like, you want to survive in, like, zombie world? For me, I'm like,
Well,
nah, fuck no,
the
man. Like,
the thing is,
I wanna survive
American
in the world where people are like, I love Patek and Rolex, and like, oh, by the way, you know about Langa? That's dope.
again, it's not. I don't want to get too metaphysical about it, but I think American society has this insularist tendency, on a collective and individual scale, where people want to shelter themselves from the outside world, whether that's trying to live in these sorts of cult compounds, um, you know. Fenced in ranches, gated communities, or the whole idea of American exceptionalism or America first kind of ideologies where we supposedly don't have to care about the rest of the world because we are exceptional, we can stand on our own. So there's that tendency in this society. But what I wanted to say again is, of course, we can make up all sorts of apocalyptic scenarios where watches won't be worth anything. And that's no secret to me. And as I said, it's a rather insignificant hobby at the end of the day. But it's in that way not much different than other commodities, other objects, other material things that we put so much value in that at the end of the day don't matter if we can't have shelter, if we can't eat, and if we can't take care of ourselves and the people who are closest to us. So if those things fail, we have completely failed as a society. So no
I
one cares
I I
about
I
anything. Forget about that.
I couldn't
Okay.
agree with you more. And I apologize if I've expressed that thought, previously, like in our private conversation. But like, to me, I remember a couple of years ago. This is probably a year and a half ago now, and I was talking to a guy. So, like, I know some people that are involved in, some, let's just say, illegitimate businesses who are, relatively well off. And I'm talking to them, and I'm trying to hold my own in the conversation. And I've been doing it by the book, paying taxes, working a job, the whole thing, for my whole life outside of school, paid for school, the whole thing. So I'm trying to, in this conversation, and I'm playing cards with these guys. We're gambling, low stakes gambling, I'm trying to be like, oh, like I'm cool. Right? I have no fucking idea of what I'm talking about. I mean, these guys and this guy who I'm talking to, I'm like, well, hey, like actually, I know about watches, right? Like I pulled the one card where it's like, actually, I know about this shit. Like I'm obsessed with it, and and he immediately kind of connected with me. And although this guy was telling me all his boys were selling APs, they're like cashing out on their APs, and all their fancy watches to buy crypto because they're convinced crypto is the future. And I'm basically being like, well, I don't know anything about that, but I know no matter what, people are going to know Rolex is the best company. That's why you should buy Rolex. And he showed me this photograph of a watch that he bought for his son as a graduation gift, and it was oyster quartz with a diamond. It was like a full diamond bezel. And the first question I had was like, I immediately could recognize the K shape
Oh, what happened there?
and the bracelet. And I was like, oh, oyster quartz, that's dope. And I was like, okay, interesting. Because I had never seen it, but it was like a round gem set. Uh, you know, I just had never seen this. I don't know if Rolex actually produced it, but I thought it was cool that he bought his kid, even if it was an aftermarket bezel, like he bought his kid an oyster quartz. Like that was his graduation gift, and I couldn't compliment him enough. If he told me, "Oh, he got nothing," but like I bought him a Bored Ape, I bought him like an NFT of like an ape. I'd be like, okay, cool. Like, hopefully he makes money. But like, he told me he's like, yeah, I bought my kid this Rolex like as his graduation gift for high school, regardless of the bezel, whether it was factory or not. That to me was really cool. And I talked to this guy before the crypto market crashed. And I still, to this day, even though the watch market has also gone down, I'm proud that in that moment when he was like, my boys are selling their APs and like swapping it out for crypto. For me, I'm like, buy Rolex. Like I don't know, like I like that somehow, like I feel justified in this moment. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I fucked up. Maybe I should be buying Dogecoin. I don't fucking know. But
Yeah. By the way, I'm tracking back and correcting myself. I don't know why I thought it was Claude Lefort, but I'll blame the whiskey. It was actually it was actually Michel Desserteau. What We Do When We Believe is the English title of the essay. Um,
what we do when we believe.
yeah. So I will just write it here in the chat as well. And so what we do when we believe, and it's mostly a metaphysical conversation, but it actually also goes into um, the philological and semantic connections between the whole system of credibility, credit. Of course, believing in French shares the same roots. Since he writes this in French, there's that immediate resonance. Um, so it's an interesting essay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know if it was part of a book or a separate piece. I don't remember the context, but it's been a while since I have read it, and but I do remember being quite impressed by it.
I bought this David Graeber book a few years ago, and
Ah,
I haven't committed enough time to it. It's called like Debt: The First 5,000 Years. Like that's like it's like this book that's like about this concept of how debt and lending, like all that kind of stuff, like is like this, you know, now it's this modern idea, like, oh, okay, yes, but like it's kind of old. Like the concept is kind of old, right? And so Graeber kind of like explores this idea and like where it originates from and how it's evolved over the years. But I'll just say like I haven't like I bought this book and it's so thick and dense. And I haven't even I started to read it at one point in time and I honestly I just gave up, you know. But I'm so fascinated by this concept, you
I
know.
haven't I haven't read that, but I remember people were talking quite heavily about it when it came out. But I somehow it struck me at a busy time, and I have not gone back to it. Um, but
Well,
yeah, man. I
you
mean,
know, that's
the
a
notion of value is very very fickle, very arbitrary. You know, you have to be quite specific about what you're talking about, and when it comes to watches, you know, it's like you said, no one needs to tell you that this might be frivolous pursuit. I think we all know by now that this is an ebb and flow, and you can't treat watches purely as financial investment. You have to ultimately put your heart into it. You have to ultimately take a certain kind of risk for something that you enjoy, for something that you want to build on the basis of how strongly you feel, on the basis of how much you want to learn, and how much you want to um, basically appreciate what are essentially miniature, mass-produced works of art. Um, you know, it is. I think that's the best way I can sum it up. But you don't necessarily have to justify it to anyone else as long as you can justify it to yourself.
No, I totally agree, and I will just say that the whole miniature mass-produced work of art thing, um, you know, this is another one of those areas where I'm like very much so a stickler because you really have to look around yourself. Like, I think one of the things that certain people I know myself, and I think a lot of these other watch geeks, you know, the people who are obsessed with the hobby, are they find themselves um, immersed in and enamored with is this aspect of the technological and the the way that there's a problem that needs to be solved, right? So like we have a mathematical, technological, scientifical way that we solve this problem. And like horology has been the science, and there are mechanisms that exist within horological science that keep being recreated. And well, how do we solve this problem? How do we solve this problem? And there are people that they figure out a way to beautify it, you know. And there's this beautification of this like mathematical problem solving aspect, and that can
If
be
I may,
commodified.
just so we don't get into another point before I clarify this to myself. So you're
Hmm.
essentially saying that watches are first and foremost tools that can have an added layer of beauty, that can have an aesthetic value, but primarily they are tools that address particular problems, that fulfill certain functions, that may also be beautified after the fact. So you were basically saying they they are not works of art. Is that
I,
did I
to
understand
me,
correctly?
there is a distinction, as someone who has studied the history of art making and, understanding that you could, like, architecture could be art, a statue could be art, whatever. To me, watches, and one of the reasons why, my late 20s, basically coming up to my 30s, I started to really appreciate timekeeping as its
Mhm.
own unique kind of art making. Was that, oh well, especially when you look at it on the level of a handmade object. uh, I can't even begin. Anyone who really cares about watchmaking, who pays attention to all these companies, especially like the Greubel Forces, like like the FP Shorns, like these companies who are literally at the pinnacle of watchmaking. When you see the fact that it actually requires someone to do it by hand, it transcends it transcends all this mechanical technology that we have built. So we have figured out, as a society, we've figured out a way. Well, with CNC machining, with EDM, like all this type of laser this, and like 3D printing that, cool, right? And all of that is being implemented in watchmaking, right? So we have companies who are using 3D printing, which is supposed to be, and I don't, I'm going to put my tone on this because of my tone, but don't take it in the wrong way. 3D printing is supposed to save us. Like, ooh, 3D printing is supposed to be this, blah, blah, blah. There's all these promises of all this technology. You know, when Tesla first started, when Tesla stock first started peaking, everyone was like, this is the future. Well, guess what? Every other car manufacturer is making electric cars right now. So, what is it about this one particular brand that makes it unique? You know, like all of these things, eventually we have to implement all this stuff into our manufacturing. 3D printing is really unique and creative. And like, I'm trying to use that as much as I possibly can in my own art making process. However, there is a reason why contemporary watchmaking, no matter how much automation you want to throw at it, you cannot escape. There are certain things that can only be done by hand. Now, I'm not going to be, I will be the first person to acknowledge the fact that I believe one day a machine can do this. I'm not going to be in denial about that. But my acknowledgement of the fact that the organic and chaotic aspect of what a human being can do with their hand is hard for a machine to simulate. Like, I'm not going
Right.
to say it's impossible. I believe it's possible. So, does that mean, oh, we should just automate everything? And no, of course not. But in the meantime, let's, this is like this whole conversation, and like this is why, like, what one of the first one of the at the beginning, when I first started talking to you and like talking to El Professor on this platform about, hey, what are we talking about, right? Like, we're in this space, we're communicating across thousands of miles, right? We're having these conversations. We're talking about these objects that, in some cases, are mass produced. In other cases, are fussed over and not mass produced. They're really, and where is this? Where do we draw this line between these things? And to me, like that's the quintessential question. Where is the human? How does the person fit in to, well, what can a machine do? And what can you absolutely not do without a human being? And that to me is like, that's the question that I think everybody involved in the watchmaking space, whether you're trying to sell watches, whether you're trying to make watches, or if you're trying to get in and out and just make a quick buck, whatever, I don't care. No one cares. If you're a speculator, fine. But in the long term game, how do we as human beings interact with this science, with this art, and with this technology? How do we keep it something that is like really truly human and organic? Or do we relinquish that and say this is the future and let the robots
Well,
lead us?
I think there is. I mean, there are a couple of ways to approach it. If you ask me, from the most diplomatic perspective, I think, in a way, watches are really a combination of all of the above, right? But I do privilege, like you do, what you might call a human touch, or the human factor, the human element, whether that is expressed in terms of finding ingenious solutions to technical problems, mostly proposed by the fact that you have to squeeze everything into uh, that little, you know, around 40 millimeter diameter and 10, 12 millimeter thick case, right? It's quite marvelous when you think about it. Like, watchmaking is in many ways like ship in a bottle, you know, that you essentially build in miniature, something that is quite technical, quite ingenious, quite practical in terms of the solutions that it faces, in terms of accuracy, in terms of precision, in terms of different complications that can aid with timekeeping. But it's also artful. Uh, it can also express all kinds of beauty, uh, even if we simply consider it as a piece of jewelry and not necessarily a more heightened form or work of art. Um, One thing that the watches, I think, have, mechanical watches have as an advantage to all these other forms of production that might be more enamored um, with 3D painting and other sorts of machine aided, um, or even machine guided and machine led production. Watches have a lot of room to leave for for the human hand, and in fact, the reason people started idolizing, and fetishizing a lot of the independent brands more recently is because they provide that sort of human touch. So for me, I'm not necessarily worried about the disappearance of that particular human factor within the world of horology, within the world of mechanical watches. My worry would be how, going forward, how accessible will that be? Will it be offered at these stratospheric prices that are outside of the reach of most people, except for very, very affluent, except for very, very socioeconomically privileged? Or maybe this is where technical innovation and problem solving comes in. Are we going to be able to find new solutions to be able to mass produce and, in a way, democratize these kinds of um, craft, art, science? That is to me the problem. I don't think human
I
factor is
I I
necessary.
I couldn't. I mean, I know it's you're pose it as a question, so it's not like, well, this is my position and therefore I agree or disagree. But like, I mean, I think about it the same way. You know, I think that I think that watchmaking in general and timekeeping and how we look at problem solving, like mechanical problem solving, you know, I mean, I can't help but romanticize this, and this is why for me, like I'm experiencing a personal renaissance in my life that is not one that is just about capital accumulation, right? Like my watch, like my hobby of watchmaking, my really getting into the history of watchmaking and wanting to collect watches and wanting to spend my very, very limited and hardly earned dollars on these incredibly expensive objects. Like, that's not just because I have a lot of money, I gotta buy a nice watch. Like, it has nothing to do with that. Like, I genuinely believe this particular hobby is one that, even as our technology advances and we figure out new ways of keeping time, and we figure out better ways of keeping time, it's still going to be really hard for a machine to do what a watchmaker does. Um, and it's hard. It's it's hard to articulate this stuff if you haven't actually tried to take a watch apart. But I told you, like, my whole experience with trying to do this, especially when you're nervous and your hand is shaking, is like it's actually really hard. And
Oh,
if they had robots, if they had
just
robots that could.
just a quick point here,
Mhm,
because we were talking about Lange earlier as well. Next time you go into a Lange boutique,
mhm.
um, if you have a lot of time on your hands, ask them, can you show me some examples of your attempts at engraving and finishing and decorating parts from your trip to the manufacturing Glashütte? And there's a chance that they might have a few things to show you, uh,
Oh,
and it looks so awful.
right.
And I'm sure some of these people, I mean, I'm not very good with my hands in
Hmm.
general, right? I don't sketch well, I don't draw well, etc. So
Well,
I
how
don't,
how do you know? Who says who?
because I've tried and I'm not doing well. But the what I
Well, I
mean is,
mean, have you let YouTube decide?
forget that. The the point is there are people, um, I mean, some of these people who work on watches, right? They have all sorts of different backgrounds. Some of them might be even artistic, and one of the salespeople was showing me what they tried in terms of freehand engraving this
Hmm.
famous Lange und Söhne balance conch, and it was like a child's painting that only a parent would plaster on a fridge. And
Like, it's beautiful. It looks beautiful.
and you look under the loop to the work of an actual artisan,
Right.
and it's night and day, right? So
I mean, come on. Like, we all know. Anybody who's not a fucking asshole knows that we do not have robots that can do this shit. Like, we don't. As much as as much as all these fucking incel, stands who just want to suck off Elon till the end of the fucking stratosphere, whatever the fuck you want to say. It's like, bro, like the robots, like this whole future that you imagine, like that you're betting on, that you think is going to happen, we're not there yet. We're here right now. There are certain things that robots cannot do. Okay, yes, acknowledge that, accept it, accept it. Come to a realization that this futuristic hellscape that you think will free us, actually, guess what? We're not there, right? We're here. We're here. What do you do, right? Like, like I wish I was a better watchmaker because I have gotten so obsessed with this hobby in the past 5 to 7 years. But guess what? I'm not a fucking watchmaker. I've been working in construction. I've been doing all this shit, you know, project management, design, drafting, blueprints, blah blah blah. Like it it's like you can't none of this stuff. There is no shortcut. Like everyone is trying to sell you, right? Like SBF, like this whole fucking crypto bullshit where all these people got fucked out of their money. Everyone's trying to sell you like here's a get rich quick scheme. It doesn't work that way. Like we exist in a physical world. There's a limited amount of resources. What are we going to do with these things? How are we going to focus our energy? And I even think like in the watchmaking space, like I think there's a lot of companies like who are trying to, they're trying to be on the precipice of like, oh, what's the next frontier of watchmaking? Like, why? Why are you doing that? Like, it's already hard enough as it is. Like, don't create a new problem to solve. Like figure out what the fundamental problems. And listen, like I don't have the answers. I'm not the person who's solving these problems, but as an observer, I can see in the industry to me, and because I geek out on this and I'm a fanboy, like the MBNF and what they've done, not only with their perpetual calendar and how they've figured out a way to do it, but oh, how do we do a Rattrapant? Like, how do we do like this sequential chronograph that never previously existed? Like how do you like don't make the problem more complicated than it needs to be. Look at the issue. Say, where are these fun you watch this video, like the video that Max and Steven released after they dropped this insane GPHD winning Ogidor winning watch. They said, here's our thing. All these people, they were using multiple chronographs when they had multiple watches, that multiple sorry, what I'm drawing a blank now. It's like they what is the name? Like they had these I don't even know if it's like chronograph is the correct term, because they were just stopwatches basically. So they had like they would line up these stopwatches in a row when they were timing these racing events, and they tried to figure out like how do we put that all into one watch. Like that to me is like that's not like, oh, like let's let AI solve it for us. Like we're humans and like we can never do what robots do. It's like no, like like this is a problem. Like how do we solve this problem? And they actually did that shit. Like they figured out a way in one time piece to say how do we combine multiple chronographs in one watch. And like I apologize. I know I geek out on this shit and I talk about it all the time, but like to me, like this is the quintessential example of why all the bullshit they tell you about how somehow ingenuity and thinking and just human, like actual, like real human problem solving, it doesn't matter anymore. It's like, no, that, like, that shit actually matters. Like, we actually need to be thinking about things like this. Like, we need to be applying this type of problem solving to real world conditions. You know, things like, how do we desalinate the world? Like, how do we figure out a way to make sure that there's ample food, you know, for 10 billion human beings? How do we figure out a way to make sure we have enough fresh water to keep people hydrated? Like, these are real conditions. They have nothing to do with clout or success. Like, this is the type of stuff that a person, in my opinion, who could solve these complicated watchmaking issues, like, yeah, let's make these fancy objects that we could put a slap on our wrist and say, I paid 200 grand for it. But how do you,
Oh, did we lose you? I can't hear you,
how do you
St. Peter.
feed? How do you, that's the question.
You're cutting out once every so often. I missed half of what you said in the last two
Oh
sentences.
man, sorry.
No, just the
Sorry,
last two
I'm sorry about
sentences.
that.
No worries.
You know,
But how
it's
do
just you know, this is my end of the year, like, unloading frustration. You know, it's like, I love this hobby and I love the fact that a lot of money goes into it and a lot of people are enamored by it and invested in it. You know, it's, listen, like, this is a, there's no denying the fact that, like, for whatever reason, there's a lot of eyes on watchmaking. You know, how do we make money off, how do we get invested in it, how do we make money off it, how does it improve our life going forward? And I don't want to ever let go of that kind of drive and that passion and that ingenuity that I personally, I think, has been lacking in contemporary society in our digital age. Like, you know, this old world, you know, how do we solve these mechanical problems with our hands, thinking through stuff, like, actually with our heads, not relying on a computer. How do we do it? It blows my mind that there, like, GPHG, like, the pinnacle of one of the highest art form crafts in the world, this year said, oh my God, look at what this guy thought of. No one else ever in the world thought of what he thought, but somehow it happened. And it happened through this mechanism that exists on your wrist. That to me is brilliant. That's breathtaking. Now, whether or not you talk to someone, you know, outside of this hobby, and oh no, but he figured out a way where, like, you start it and, like, both clocks start at the same time, and then they stop and then blah blah, and they fly back at the same, or whatever. It, yeah, okay. Maybe they don't get it, but the whole idea was, like, we have been doing it wrong. Like, we have been trying to solve the problem of how do you put two chronographs in the same watch at the same time for nearly, what, 100, 200 years, 150 years, something like that. And boom, you know, it happens. And I just think that that's great that we did that for a watch. How do we do it now for, you know, feeding people? How do we do it for housing people? How do we do it for keeping people hydrated? You know, when the water runs out. You know, when, like, the Colorado River finally, boom, it's not there anymore. You know, Like, how do you keep people doing that? And I understand, like, it's not it's it's not fun to talk about, but like these minds, I generally believe the people who are working on these very niche luxury things right now, they are going to be the same kind of minds that help us get to that place in the future. So I thank you for giving me the giving me the stage, letting me voice my opinion, and it means a lot.
Of course, man, you're always welcome here. I also wanted to, of course, bring to the screen the watch you have been talking about, which is the MBNF Legacy Machine Sequential Evo, a revolutionary solution to the chronograph. Like you said, really putting more than one chronograph into a single case and still making it somehow wearable, still making it so beautiful and balanced, and expressing it in the unique uh, visual language that they have distinguished themselves with. Um, and yeah, it has not won just any prize within the GPHG, right? It has won the grandest of all grand prizes, the Aiguille d'Or. Um, that's a great achievement for MBNF. And again, it's really kind of the hallmark of how far a lot of these independent brands have come from languishing really in relative obscurity and facing extinction about 10 years ago to being at the center stage, at least for some of them, um, of the watchmaking world in year 2022 and looking forward. You there still?
Hello.
Oh man, the I don't know what you're doing with the headphones, but there's so much rustling at some point. It was scratching my ears, but it's good now. It's much better.
Can you hear me now, or is it bad?
No, no, it's good. It's good now. Very good.
I appreciate the fact that you advise people on, like, hey, like, this is a move, like, make this move, like, this is my opinion. And I couldn't, and again, this is like me being this romanticist. Like, I wouldn't even begin to, when I was at watch time, like, I saw Max and he was there and people were queued up waiting to shake his hand. And I was like, I
Mhm.
can't, like, I want to shake this guy's hand. Like, I want to geek out and be like, I love you, like, blah, blah, blah. It's like, but I saw him, right? Like, I was there. I saw the watch. I saw him. I saw the whole thing. And, like, I was there. And it didn't feel like it was the right time for me to introduce myself to him. And so I didn't do that. And, like, I don't think that I missed anything, right? Because it was all there. Like, I saw it all happening. Like, I could have cut in the line, or I could have waited in line, all those things. But for me, as an advisor, like, if I was trying to tell someone, you know, if you could get your hands on this piece, buy this piece, it would be this chronograph. Because I generally believe, similar to how I believe the original perpetual calendars that they made, and how they solved a problem in a different way. I really believe, like, the that is the future. You know, it's like it's not like everything is going to be this watch. That's not the point. The point is they saw a problem and they said no one has been able to solve this. And you know what? It's kind of messed up because people are trying to solve the wrong part of the equation. How do we do it? And it's a really beautiful, like it's beautiful that this particular house, you know, this school, like this ideology has said we are going to invest the resources into making this happen. And, and I generally believe like didn't it didn't if
You are you're cutting out. Um, you're cutting out, SP. I don't know if SP is still with us. St. Peter, are you there? Petros, Botros, Bedros. No, none of these work. Hello? I think this time we have been genuinely disconnected. Let's see. Welcome back. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello. My friend, are you there? Can you hear me? Mm.
Hello.
Yes. Hi. How are you doing? Hello. Can you hear me? Man, I don't know. I can't hear you though. Mm. I don't know if it's the connection or if it's the headset, but somehow. Well, mm. All right. St. Peter, I don't know what's going on your end, but I cannot actually hear you at all. So I don't know how to move forward. Maybe you should try to go out and back in, and maybe we can integrate you again. Um, yes, if you would like to come back in, I'm sending the link out again, and that goes for everyone. As you guys know, this is an open platform, and I usually run the show until midnight. I may or may not end it soon, but we were basically talking about um, our favorite releases of 2022, and also, in a way, also venting about our disappointments in the world of watches. uh, more generally. And honestly, the conversation evolved into in so many different directions, and really turned into an exploration of how we look to the world of watches, what we find in them. Is it really uh, ingenious solutions to technical problems that we face when we address questions of timekeeping? Are we looking for beauty in this sort of quotidian, miniature, and portable form? Um, are we looking for tools in wristwatches, or are we looking for beautiful objects, pieces of jewelry, essentially? Um, and at the end, we basically came full circle and talked about St. Peter's favorite release of the year, which was an MBNF Max Büsse and Friends legacy machine sequential Evo, which combines basically two chronograph movements in the same case and somehow produces something that no one chronograph could accomplish unless you're talking about an entire set of stopwatches and timekeeping devices. And at the end of the day, I'm always taken by those sorts of pieces that do solve problems that we don't even really have at this point in time. Right? These things are impressive because they are tackled and resolved within that limited space of 40, 42, at most 43, I think, uh, millimeter case, a ship in a bottle type of mechanical device that is the wristwatch. Right? And we have talked a little bit about this, and I've always said that to me, it's always more impressive when I see, perpetual calendar chronograph watches from the mid-century, for example, that are 34, 35 millimeters. Right? To me, it's a lot more impressive uh, when I see how they squeezed in so much complication into such a minuscule piece of equipment. And in the same way, I've said many times that, um, there are a lot of beautiful watches, a lot of interesting complications, a lot of fascinating things that F. Bejon produces, but the chronomètre à résonance will always remain Jean's crown achievement because it's managed to accomplish in a wearable wristwatch with a 40 millimeter case diameter what Breguet had done in a big watch that, if I'm not mistaken, had like a 63 millimeter of diameter. Again, what F. Bejon did in chronomètre à résonance was basically to house in the space of a single wristwatch two distinct movements that regulate each other through this phenomenon of resonance. So, to me, it will remain always impressive. Like a lot of the complicated watches that Blancpain produced in the 90s, when it was still, in an important sense, uh, a Biver and Piguet collaboration. All these complicated watches they produced in the 90s in 34 millimeter cases, like the Vieret perpetual calendar, for example. I think that to me is much more fascinating than uh, a lot of still very important, very significant, and very beautiful watches that are made in 40, 42, 44 millimeters. Um, so I really value that particular aspect of watchmaking where you can tackle a lot of these interesting difficulties of making a precise, accurate, uh, and complicated timekeeping device within that limited space where everything has to fit just right. Uh, and of course, we value it even more if that minuscule uh, mechanical device also has that many components, all of which are somehow hand finished uh, and somehow manipulated, decorated, and put together by the human hand. It's always much more impressive to um, not only have the knowledge of, but have a sense of, and have an experience of the human touch that ultimately brought to us those marvelous machines that we can wear on a daily basis on our wrists. So it's really an interesting world, and I think for that reason, um, people invest a lot in watches, not necessarily financially. That to me is always a relatively rarefied, uh, rare, and exceptional phenomenon. People have Certain kinds of people have always made more money in watches. I know John Goldberger is actually a businessman, and no offense, but I don't know if he has actually made more money uh, in watches or in his actual line of business. Um, there is a famous watch collector called Dr. Geschwind, Dr. Eugen Geschwind, or Eugène Geschwind. Um, I think he must have passed away sometime in the 90s, but he was a very important collector of a lot of uh, these important independent makers that people worship today. Um, a lot of pocket watches in his collection. Um, and and there's actually an exhibition of his collection in Basel, if I'm not mistaken, or at least there was at some point in time. But anyway, he, for example, was apparently a dentist. Um, but I'm sure he made more money in buying and selling watches and collecting watches, really, than uh, than he made fixing other people's teeth, which, by the way, is a pretty lucrative line of work in either case. Um, so it's not an absurd suggestion that you can actually invest in watches financially and that you can actually make money in it. And I'm not denying that, but I think that that involves too much risk. That involves uh, that potentially involves a lot of heartbreak, um, and a lot of financial ruin for no particular reason. Um, in in my case, I simply recognize that there's so much marvel, um, so much fascination, uh, so many miraculous technical solutions, and so much beauty in such minimal real estate, that people invest a lot of emotions, that people invest a lot of thought, and that inevitably people invest a lot of money on wristwatches. And I think ultimately the important thing is to remain knowledgeable, to remain conscious, to have an idea about what it is that you're actually getting from a historical standpoint, from a technical standpoint, from a horological standpoint. And as long as you are happy with that decision yourself, as long as you can justify that decision to yourself, the rest is easy. At the end of the day, um, these are things that you should be buying with disposable income, not getting into any sort of financial risk. These are things that you should always um, look at with a very sound mind, with a very strictly delimited and decided upon budget. Um, that and I'm here for you whenever you need some kind of professional advice and an expert opinion. Um, I think I'm gonna take about 10 more minutes. In the meantime, I have dropped the link, so if you do want to jump on the panel and engage me in a discussion, I would welcome that, and I can stay on for longer. We can talk a little bit more about what we enjoyed in the world of watches in 2022, what we liked in terms of the releases, what were our disappointments, what we are expecting yet from the world of watches in the year to come. Otherwise, if you have any questions, if you have any topics, any issues that you would like me to address before I close in the time that remains, feel free to send them in with a super chat. Um, Otherwise, I will slowly unwind and close in about 10 minutes. And and tomorrow we can talk about what my favorite release was 2022. We can talk about the upcoming Antiquorum auction uh, in Monaco on January 19th. They have just released the catalog. Um, and we can also talk about your highlights and your disappointments from the year in terms of the world of watches. And only 2 more days to go. Only 2 more days to go. Again, I'm trying to decide whether I want to run a marathon. I will certainly have a late show, it seems, on New Year's Eve. So I'll probably see you in either case. But if I have more community involvement, if I can have more people on the panel, um, and it doesn't have to be the entire day, 24 hours necessarily, but certainly I would like to stay a little longer for at least the 31st. But perhaps we can start at some point, pardon me, at some point tomorrow. This is an amazing watch, by the way. Uh, I had found another interesting thing, but the one you mean with the honeycomb dial is even more fascinating, Saad. So let's look at that before we close. But for all of you who are still tuned in and who have enjoyed the show, who have learned something from it, please hit the like button. It really helps. It does matter. So please, it's the least you can do, and it's free. Upvote the stream. It is really appreciated. I'm grateful for your presence and support. So let's look at my friend Saad's suggestion. This is, wow, honeycomb pave dial with diamonds, sapphires, and rubies, and a bezel set with baguette cut sapphires and diamond center links on Jubilee bracelet. Wow. We were just talking about watches that look like a piece of jewelry, but more than a piece of jewelry, this Rolex Day Date looks like a vanity chest. You know the way it's decorated in these hexagonal shapes. Wow, it looks like this kind of Arabic slash Eastern mother of pearl inlaid, jewelry boxes. I don't know if you know what I mean. Um, let's see if I can show you an example of what I mean. It's really an amazing watch. This, yeah, it's not as impressive as what I have in mind, but I meant something like this, right? I felt like that day date almost looks like an entire jewelry box. So detailed and so intricate and so multi-layered in its decoration. It's amazing. And the other 18168 that I found when you just gave me the reference number, um, Saad, was this. This is much more plain, right? It's a day date on a president bracelet. and it has a bezel set with baguette cut diamonds and a lapis lazuli dial, which, as Rolex does with a lot of the semi-precious stone dials, they did not interrupt with any furniture or fixture at all. They just left it naked in its uninterrupted beauty. I really like this as well. Uh, it has a very pure and beautiful expression. Hmm. It's beautiful, Saad. Thank you for thank you for sharing. Um, yes. So on that note, I'm about to sign off, unless somehow Saad jumps on, and I will send the link. But I think he might actually be at work, which I completely understand. Please hit the like button if you want to support the channel. Of course, super chats are open. You can also uh, have a kind of super thanks kind of comment after the live stream ends. As a comment to the video, you can leave a contribution as well. If you want to support the channel in other ways, say PayPal or Cash App, the information is in the crawling ticker. It is included in the video description and also pinned in the chat. You can click the links directly. For the Patreon, once again, I have an introductory rate that I'm going to keep for the remainder of the year, um, at $10 per month. The services I provide are going to expand as well, but the rate is going to increase accordingly. But if you sign up now at $10 at the initiate level, you'll be grandfathered in for the entire year 2023. And currently, I send at least 3 links to watch deals around the internet. And these are great value propositions always. Although, again, I always advise patience. I always advise study and research. There's always a better deal down the road. The best deal is always the next deal. But the more important part of this service is that it is also very informative and educational, because I make it very focused and usually organized around the theme, around the genre of a watch, or a watch model that escapes mainstream attention and that falls through the cracks. So you end up learning about new things and starting to explore the secondary market with a very different eye. So please, um, see if it is for you, and if you don't like it after a month, you can always choose to discontinue as well. But that's something I provide. I will provide more. It will give you a direct line of communication with me, and ultimately, I will always tailor my services there according to your needs. Trooper, thank you so much. $5 Australian. Season's greetings. Happy holidays and a happy new year ahead to you and yours, Trooper. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Saad, thank you for your greetings as well. Love you both. So, um, this is it for today, everyone. Thank you for your presence and support. If you haven't done so yet, please hit the like button. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. I have pretty extensive archive of live streams and videos. Uh, Check them out. I'm sure you'll find something that would interest you. A lot of it is organized around playlists. Um, you can always write to me directly at lordhellesmont5 at gmail.com. That's lordhellesmont v at gmail.com. If you need me to advise you on anything, help you on your watch collecting journey, or simply create a particular kind of content for you, you can always write to me directly. Um, Subscribe to the channel. I'm here every day on a live stream, usually. And other than that, I will see you tomorrow at the same time. And until then, I bid you adieu. Take care, everyone. Happy New Year ahead. Happy holidays.